The commercial airliner shuddered violently through the storm, passengers screaming in terror. A flight attendant shouted desperately, "Is there any pilot on board?" Silence, eyes filled with despair. The captain's voice crackled over the intercom. "We need a combat pilot." Now, in row 10, a blonde woman opened her eyes, unbuckled her seatbelt, stood up. She took the microphone, voice steady and low. "Daybreak-Nine, copy." The radio frequency went dead for half a second. Then F-22 fighters responded in unison. Nora Vance, 30 years old, long blonde hair cascading over her shoulders, wearing a crisp silk blouse and tailored pencil skirt. Slender, strikingly beautiful, but completely exhausted. She occupied seat 10C, her head resting against the small airline pillow, a charcoal blazer draped carefully across her lap, sleeping so deeply that even the engine noise couldn't disturb her peace. Passengers around her noticed everything during the 3-hour flight. The businessman's loud phone calls, the crying baby in row 5, the turbulence that made coffee cups rattle. But absolutely nobody paid attention to Nora. She was invisible. Just some woman sleeping it off. During meal service, when a little girl in pigtails accidentally knocked her plastic water bottle into the aisle, Nora's hand shot out reflexively, catching it before it hit the floor. All while her eyes remained closed, her breathing steady. Pure muscle memory from years of training most passengers couldn't imagine. The plane shook lightly as they hit the first patch of rough air. Passengers shifted uncomfortably, murmuring complaints about the bumpy ride. A few called for flight attendants, but Nora kept sleeping peacefully, her body automatically adjusting to the aircraft's movements. Nobody thought anything unusual about her natural stability. When the real turbulence struck harder, the cabin erupted in nervous chatter. Overhead bins rattled ominously. Some passengers began shouting, demanding explanations, blaming the flight crew for the rough conditions. Seatbelt signs flashed urgently. The lead flight attendant, her face pale with worry, called out desperately, "Ladies and gentlemen, has anyone here ever flown an aircraft? Any aviation experience at all?" A few hands went up hesitantly. A retired airline mechanic, someone who'd taken flying lessons decades ago. But their uncertain expressions revealed the truth. None of them could handle what was coming. The captain's voice boomed over the intercom, cutting through the chaos. "This is your captain speaking. We have a serious situation. We need a military pilot, a fighter pilot, immediately." That's when everything changed. Nora's eyes snapped open instantly. Not the slow, confused awakening of someone pulled from deep sleep, but the immediate, laser-sharp focus of someone responding to a mission alert. She sat up straight, her entire posture transforming. The tired business traveler vanished completely. Her gaze swept the cabin with tactical precision, assessing, calculating, already 3 steps ahead. A passenger sitting directly beside her later told reporters, when those words, "combat pilot," echoed through the cabin. I watched her eyes open like someone had flipped a switch. It wasn't the confused, groggy look you'd expect from someone waking up. It was ice-cold focus, professional, like she'd been waiting for that exact call her entire life. The transformation was instantaneous and complete. The sleeping woman in row 10 had vanished. Someone else, entirely, had taken her place. Around the cabin, passengers continued their panicked conversations, arguing with flight attendants, demanding impossible answers from the crew. The aircraft pitched and rolled through increasingly violent storm cells, emergency lighting casting eerie shadows across frightened faces. But in row 10, absolute stillness. Nora sat perfectly upright, listening intently. Her mind was already processing flight dynamics, weather patterns, emergency procedures that most civilian passengers had never heard of. Her breathing remained controlled, her hands steady. This wasn't Nora, the exhausted traveler, anymore. This was Major Nora Vance, U.S. Air Force, and she was back on duty. Nora unbuckled her seatbelt with one fluid motion, rising to her feet with the kind of controlled grace that made nearby passengers instinctively step back. Her voice cut through the cabin noise, calm and completely controlled. "I need immediate cockpit communication." Several passengers turned to stare in complete disbelief. A middle-aged woman clutched her husband's arm. What is she talking about? "Lady, sit down before you get hurt." The man in the expensive gray business suit 3 rows ahead actually laughed out loud, his voice dripping with condescension. "Oh, this is perfect. Is this some kind of joke? You think you're a pilot now? This is a crisis, not amateur hour." Nora's expression didn't change. She repeated her request, each word precisely articulated. "Open the communication channel. I will verify my credentials in 15 seconds." The lead flight attendant, a veteran with 20 years of service, hesitated for a crucial moment. Training said no unauthorized personnel in the cockpit, but desperation overruled protocol. She fumbled for the intercom microphone, her hands shaking as she handed it over. Nora accepted the device, her fingers finding the transmission button with practiced ease. She spoke just 2 words into the static-filled frequency. "Daybreak-Nine, copy." The response came exactly half a second later, cutting through the storm interference with crystal clarity. "Falcon Lead, reading you loud and clear, Daybreak-Nine. Request your status." The entire cabin fell into stunned silence. Every conversation stopped mid-sentence. The mockery evaporated instantly. The panic paused as 200 passengers tried to process what they'd just witnessed. This woman, this tired-looking passenger they'd ignored for 3 hours, was talking to military aircraft like she owned the entire frequency. Without missing a beat, Nora immediately began her assessment. "Falcon Lead, I need current altitude, airspeed, engine status, and weather radar display from the cockpit. Stand by for verification." She listened intently as the captain provided the requested data, then repeated everything back with technical precision, adding specific adjustment recommendations that made the co-pilot's eyes widen in recognition. "Flight attendants," Nora called out, her voice carrying absolute authority. "I need you to redistribute passenger luggage from the overhead compartments directly above the right wing. Move everything toward the center aisle. We're dealing with a center of gravity issue that's amplifying our storm response." The crew moved immediately, without question. Passengers who had been demanding answers suddenly found themselves helping without being asked. The man in the gray suit who had mocked her earlier was now pressed against his window, his face completely drained of color. His expensive confidence had crumbled entirely. The head flight attendant, Maria Santos, later described the moment in interviews. "She spoke with this incredible steady rhythm. Every word timed perfectly with her breathing. She never raised her voice, never showed the slightest hint of panic or uncertainty. But somehow, the entire cabin became synchronized with that rhythm. People stopped shouting. They started listening. It was like watching a conductor take control of an orchestra. Through the small aircraft windows, sharp-eyed passengers began pointing at dark shapes moving through the storm clouds with impossible precision. Sleek, angular forms that cut through the turbulence like it didn't exist. The radio crackled again with a transmission that made everyone's breath catch. Daybreak-Nine, this is Falcon Lead. We have you covered with 2 birds on your wing. Weather reconnaissance shows a clear corridor opening at your 2 o'clock position. F-22 Raptors, the most advanced fighter aircraft in the world, maintaining perfect formation beside their struggling commercial airliner through conditions that would challenge any pilot. Passengers pressed their faces against windows, some crying at the sight of the military escort materializing through the storm like guardian angels with afterburners. "Oh my God," someone whispered, the realization finally sinking in. "She really is? She's actually—" But Nora was already moving toward the cockpit, her temporary command of the cabin situation complete. Every passenger was now focused, calm, ready to follow instructions. The businessman who had ridiculed her stood up as she passed, his voice barely audible. "Ma'am, I'm sorry. I didn't know. I couldn't have known." Nora paused for just a moment, her expression softening slightly. "No apology necessary. You reacted like any civilian would. But now I need you to help keep everyone calm while I work." He nodded eagerly, suddenly desperate to contribute rather than criticize. The cockpit door opened, revealing 2 experienced airline pilots whose faces showed a mixture of profound relief and professional curiosity. The captain looked back, his eyes wide with hope and confusion. "Ma'am, I don't know who you are or how you made contact with those fighters, but Major Nora Vance, United States Air Force, retired." She moved into the cockpit with fluid efficiency, settling into the observer's jump seat. "What's our complete situation assessment?" The co-pilot stared in amazement. "Major, you were sleeping in row 10 20 minutes ago." Nora's hands were already scanning the instrument panels, her trained eyes reading data faster than the regular crew could process. "I was off duty 20 minutes ago. Now I'm not." Outside the storm, the F-22 escort maintained their protective positions, their pilots recognizing both the call sign and the voice. One of them keyed his radio. "Good to have you back in the game, Daybreak-Nine." Nora settled into the cockpit's jump seat, her eyes conducting a systematic scan of every instrument panel, backup system, and warning indicator. Years of fighter pilot training had taught her to process vast amounts of technical information in seconds, and now that skill might save everyone on board. She began issuing precise instructions to the captain. Maintain current pitch attitude at +2 degrees, stabilize indicated airspeed at 280 knots, and execute a gradual vector 15 degrees left to avoid the heaviest storm cells showing on your weather radar. The captain's hands moved across the controls with renewed confidence. For the first time since the emergency began, he had someone with superior training guiding every decision. He didn't question her credentials anymore. Her competence was evident in every word. Nora simultaneously coordinated with air traffic control. "ATC, this is Flight 447, requesting immediate priority corridor clearance to alternate destination. We need emergency approach clearance and full ground support standing by." Flight 447, you are cleared for priority handling. Emergency equipment is being positioned now. The F-22s maintained their protective formation outside the aircraft, keeping the radio frequencies clear of unnecessary chatter, responding only when directly addressed. Daybreak-Nine, we have clear air ahead. Your approach corridor is secure. In the passenger cabin behind them, an unprecedented calm had settled over everyone. People sat quietly, their complete attention focused on the closed cockpit door. Even crying children had quieted, somehow sensing the change in atmosphere. The businessman in the gray suit sat with his head bowed, whispering repeated apologies to himself for his earlier behavior. Through the cockpit windows, the storm began showing signs of weakening. Nora's tactical weather assessment had been perfect. They were threading the needle through the eye of the system. "Captain," Nora continued her guidance, "reduce engine power to 75% thrust. In conditions like these, we want to let the aircraft find its natural stable attitude rather than fighting the turbulence with excessive power inputs." "Copy that, Major." The captain's voice carried new respect and confidence. The engine's tone shifted as he adjusted the throttles. "ATC, Flight 447 requesting immediate clearance for emergency descent to flight level 200. We're beginning our approach sequence now." Flight 447, cleared for emergency descent as requested. All emergency equipment is standing by at your destination. Nora's trained eyes continued monitoring every system indicator. Oil pressure readings, hydraulic system status, electrical generation, fuel flow rates, engine temperature parameters. Her fighter pilot background meant she noticed details that even experienced commercial pilots might miss during high-stress situations. "Captain, I'm seeing a slight hydraulic pressure drop in your secondary system. It's still within acceptable parameters, but I recommend switching to manual backup mode for landing gear extension when we reach that phase." The co-pilot checked his instruments, amazement clear in his voice. "She's absolutely right. How did you spot that? I completely missed it in all this chaos." "It's what 12 years of military flying trains you to do," Nora replied simply. "In fighters, missing small details can be fatal. That training never goes away." Outside their windows, the F-22 escort adjusted formation as the commercial airliner began its controlled descent through clearing weather. The storm clouds seemed to part around them like a corridor opening specifically for their passage. "Daybreak-Nine, weather reconnaissance confirms clear conditions ahead. You have a straight approach corridor to runway 27. Wind conditions are manageable." "Copy, Falcon Lead. Appreciate the escort." The captain glanced at Nora with growing admiration. "Major, can I ask, what type of aircraft did you fly in the service?" "F-22 Raptors," she replied, her attention focused on the approach procedures. "Same aircraft escorting us right now." Both commercial pilots' eyes widened simultaneously. The co-pilot's voice was barely audible. "You flew those? The most advanced fighters in the world?" Nora nodded, continuing her technical assessment. "For 12 years, including combat deployments in 3 different theaters. But today, we're focused on getting everyone home safely in this aircraft." As they descended through the cloud layers, the destination airport became visible below. Emergency vehicles lined both sides of the runway, their flashing lights creating patterns of red and blue against the gray afternoon sky. Ambulances, fire trucks, and airport rescue equipment stood ready. "Captain, I want you to configure for approach now. Airspeed 140 knots. Descent rate 800 feet per minute. When we reach short final approach, reduce to minimum approach speed for these wind conditions." "Roger, Major." The aircraft approached the runway in challenging crosswinds that would have been difficult even under normal circumstances. Nora provided continuous guidance. "Don't overcorrect for the wind drift. Use gentle pressure on the controls and trust your instruments. Let the aircraft stabilize itself rather than fighting it." "Understood." The captain's technique improved noticeably under her instruction. "Beautiful approach, Captain. You're doing exactly what you need to do." The runway threshold passed beneath them. The main landing gear touched down with a firm but controlled impact, bounced once as expected, then settled securely onto the concrete. The captain activated reverse thrust, and the aircraft began its deceleration roll. The passenger cabin erupted in spontaneous applause, tears of relief, and prayers of gratitude. People were crying openly, knowing they had just survived what could have been a catastrophic situation. Some passengers hugged complete strangers. The captain brought the aircraft to a complete stop, set the parking brake, and secured the engines. Then he did something unprecedented in his 20-year commercial aviation career. He opened the cockpit door, stepped into the main aisle, came to attention, and formally saluted Major Nora Vance. The image was captured on dozens of cell phone cameras. A veteran airline captain in full uniform saluting a slender woman in business attire who had just saved 247 lives, while most people assumed she was simply a tired passenger. Passengers photographed the moment, posted to social media, called family members. The story began spreading across the internet before they had even reached the gate. "Major Vance," the captain said formally, "on behalf of myself, my crew, and every passenger on this aircraft, thank you for bringing us home." Nora stood and returned the salute with military precision. "Captain, you did excellent work under extremely difficult conditions. Your crew performed flawlessly. It was an honor to fly with professionals of your caliber." But everyone present knew the truth. What she had accomplished went far beyond any standard job description or duty requirement. 24 hours later, media outlets across the country were frantically searching for the mysterious Row 10 hero, but Major Nora Vance had seemingly vanished into thin air. Airport security footage showed her walking calmly through the terminal afterward, baseball cap pulled low, small carry-on bag in hand, looking exactly like any other business traveler catching a connecting flight. The surviving passengers, however, refused to let the story disappear. They quickly organized themselves into an online community called Row 10 Survivors, sharing personal accounts, photographs, and videos of their experience. The group's first post went viral within hours. Sarah Mitchell, a marketing executive who had been seated in row 12, wrote, "For 3 hours, I thought she was nobody special. Just another tired businesswoman trying to get some sleep." When chaos erupted and everyone was screaming, only one person stepped up with complete calm and total competence. She didn't ask for recognition. She didn't hesitate. She just saved us all. 8-year-old Emma Rodriguez, the little girl whose water bottle Nora had caught reflexively, created a crayon drawing that became the group's unofficial symbol. A large commercial airliner flying alongside 2 smaller F-22 fighters, all against a bright blue sky. Her caption read in careful child's handwriting, "The sleeping lady in row 10 woke up the sky and made it safe again." The group adopted their battle cry, "Row 10 stands." Social media exploded with their hashtag. Row 10 stands began trending worldwide within 48 hours, inspiring thousands of people to share their own stories about being underestimated or witnessing hidden heroism. Video testimonials from passengers created a viral sensation. James Parker, the businessman who had initially mocked Nora, recorded an emotional apology. "I laughed at her. I actually laughed. I judged her based on appearance and assumption. She wasn't just sleeping. She was resting between missions we couldn't imagine. I learned humility from someone who showed nothing but grace under pressure." Flight attendant Maria Santos gave interviews to major networks. "In 20 years of flying, I've seen passengers panic, fight, and freeze in emergencies. I've never seen anyone transform like she did. One moment, she was invisible. The next moment, she was commanding respect from military pilots while teaching our captain advanced flying techniques. She didn't just save lives. She reminded everyone what real leadership looks like. News organizations attempted to track down Major Vance through official channels, but military personnel records remained classified. The Air Force Public Affairs Office would only confirm, Major Vance served with exceptional distinction during her career. We're proud of her service record and her actions as a civilian. We have no additional comment. The airline involved quietly implemented policy changes. Their passenger manifest system received updates that flagged certain reservations with discrete notations. Military priority, special assistance available. Gate agents received training to recognize service members traveling in civilian clothes. Captain Robert Hayes, the pilot who had saluted her, became the face of the story during media interviews. People keep asking me to describe what it was like to have a fighter pilot take control of my cockpit. But she never took control. She gave guidance while leaving me in command of my aircraft. That's leadership. That's what 12 years of military training produces. Someone who can step up in a crisis while making everyone around them better at their jobs. The story resonated internationally. Aviation blogs analyzed the technical aspects of her guidance. Military forums discussed the seamless transition from civilian to operational mode. Psychology experts examined the phenomenon of hidden competence and unconscious bias. Airport workers who had been on duty during the emergency landing shared behind-the-scenes footage. The F-22 escort had maintained formation until the commercial aircraft reached the gate, then departed with a ceremonial flyover that brought ground crews to tears. 3 months later, Row 10 survivors organized their first reunion at the same airport. They reserved an entire restaurant, displayed Emma's drawing, and observed a moment of silence for all the quiet heroes sitting next to us every day. The empty chair at their head table bore a simple placard. Major Nora Vance, Row 10, Daybreak-Nine. But the most powerful moment came when they played the air traffic control recording of her initial radio call. Her calm voice saying, "Daybreak-Nine, copy," still gave everyone chills. The Row 10 Survivors Challenge went global. Share a time when you were completely underestimated but proved your true worth when it mattered most. Use hashtag Row10 stands to remind the world that heroes hide in plain sight, waiting for their moment to change everything. Because sometimes the most ordinary-looking person in the room is actually the most extraordinary person you'll ever meet. The lesson resonated far beyond aviation or military circles. Silence isn't weakness. It's strength, waiting for the perfect moment to reveal itself. Never judge anyone by their appearance, their clothes, or their apparent circumstances. Warriors walk among us every single day, wearing business suits instead of uniforms, carrying briefcases instead of weapons, appearing ordinary while possessing extraordinary capabilities. Row 10 evolved from a simple airline seat assignment into a powerful global symbol. When the world faces its darkest moments and hope seems impossible, remember that somewhere, Daybreak-Nine is ready to open her eyes. Major Nora Vance returned to her intentionally quiet civilian life, but her legacy lived on in ways she never expected. Flight schools began teaching her techniques for crisis management. Military academies analyzed her seamless transition from off-duty to operational status. Business leadership programs studied her ability to take command without taking over. The passenger who had mocked her, James Parker, became one of the most vocal advocates for veteran recognition programs. He established a foundation providing job placement services for retired military personnel, explaining to everyone who would listen, "Heroes are hiding in plain sight. We just need to be smart enough to recognize them." 6 months after the incident, Emma Rodriguez's elementary school invited Nora to speak at their career day. She declined politely, but sent a handwritten letter that the teacher read aloud. Dear Emma and friends, you don't need to wear a uniform to be a hero. Heroes are people who help others when help is needed most. Sometimes that means flying fighter jets. Sometimes it means being kind to someone having a bad day. The uniform doesn't make the hero. The heart does. Airlines worldwide began implementing Guardian Angel programs, quietly identifying military veterans among their passengers and creating protocols for emergency situations. The aviation industry learned that their most valuable safety resources weren't always in the cockpit. Sometimes they were sleeping in row 10. The F-22 pilots who had provided escort that day requested permission to paint small airline symbols on their aircraft, a reverse of the traditional practice. Their squadron commander approved, explaining, "They protected us while we protected them." That's what wingmen do. International media continued investigating the story, but Nora had mastered the art of invisible movement. She attended her nephew's graduation, her sister's wedding, her father's retirement party, always present, always supportive, always unnoticed by strangers who might recognize her face from news footage. But sometimes, in airports around the world, eagle-eyed passengers would spot a woman who moved with unusual grace, whose eyes automatically assessed her surroundings, who unconsciously chose seats with clear sight lines to exits. When turbulence hit, they watched her posture, her breathing, her complete lack of anxiety. And occasionally, very rarely, someone would approach her quietly and simply say, "Thank you for your service." She always replied the same way, "Thank you for supporting those who serve." The Row 10 survivors continued meeting annually, their numbers growing as the story inspired others to share experiences of hidden heroism. Their reunions became celebrations of the extraordinary people living ordinary lives all around us. Emma Rodriguez, now a teenager, kept her original crayon drawing framed on her bedroom wall. She planned to become a pilot herself, inspired by The Sleeping Lady Who Woke Up the Sky. Military recruiters reported increased interest from young people who had heard the story. They wanted to develop the kind of competence and confidence that could save lives when everything went wrong. In a world obsessed with loud voices and visible success, Major Nora Vance proved that the most powerful people often speak softly and blend into crowds. The next time you're on an airplane, look around the cabin carefully. That tired-looking business traveler might be a combat veteran. The quiet person in jeans and sneakers might be a doctor. The ordinary passenger reading a book might be someone who has spent years training to save lives. Heroes don't announce themselves. They don't demand recognition. They simply show up when needed most. Row 10 stands for all of them. Daybreak-Nine stands ready. And somewhere in the sky above us, the watch continues. If you believe these quiet legacies deserve to be preserved and celebrated, share this story and subscribe to SN Quiet Stories, where we illuminate the heroes who prefer shadows to spotlights. Because in a world full of noise and self-promotion, the quiet ones change everything. And they're sitting right next to you.